COVID excitement. Maybe. I'm excited about the real potential of the COVID vaccine. This week I envisage a brighter future. I'll certainly not be volunteering my arm anytime soon, but if I find that I can no longer leave Somerset without it, then sure, shoot me up. I'm thinking about the vaccine on a few different levels here. First is the residual teenager self who wants to shout, "No! Leave me alone!" There's a slightly more adult layer that thinks, all of this is being forced on me by a government whose strings are totally operated by big business. I vote for these jerks, but they really don't give a shit about my life. The next layer up is more of a teacher, overseer level. From this perspective, I'm really hoping that everybody slurps up the vaccine repeatedly, going back for top-up doses, etc. I'm happy to play the long game. More about this later. On the very top floor is a Taoist who doesn't care much about it at all. The Taoist knows that life goes by in a blink. Nothing is good or bad, it just is. And that none of this matters at all. The bigger the fear of death, the more teenage ranting you'll do. I don't want to die. I don't want my granny to die. Bad news, people. It's coming down the turnpike looking for you. And it may be just about to ring your doorbell now. What was it that made you think you'd escape? Are you Jesus? If not, there's some bad news for you. There are currently about 7 billion of us on the planet, and 100 billion of us who have passed. If the stories are to be believed, only one person in 100 billion ever made it back, and that was only for about 3 days. The odds are not stacked in your favour. The teenager doesn't like injections and hates authority. He hates being told what to do, but is pretty powerless to do anything about it other than shout. What can we actually do anyway? Let's dip into the Tao for a quick quotation by way of a little help. Lao Tzu says, "When the common people are starving, it's because of over-taxation. Politicians get fat by padding their pockets with the working man's sweat. When the common people become rebellious, it's because of overbearing government. When the government becomes extreme, the people begin to laugh at death. By courting extremes, one invites death. By following the Tao, one chooses life." There's a lovely hint of violence secreted behind those lines. The teenager really feels the overbearing government. The teenager is starting to laugh at death in the face. The rebellion is coming, and we'll be better organised than we've ever been. Just look at Hong Kong students, Buddhist monks setting themselves alight from Vietnam to Myanmar and Tibet, to the streets of every major city, from Lima in Peru to Portland in Oregon, through London, Paris and on to Belarus. The people are ready to resist the steady decline of life's quality and value. Any minute now, the teenager will kick off, and the politicians and big business will burn for their sins. The more mature adult self, who's hoping that people will slurp up the vaccine, is thinking of the end game and the end of Big Pharma. I'm sure those of a certain age will remember the thalidomide scandal. The stories doing the rounds about the latest vaccine. Some people claim that it will irrevocably change us at the very DNA and RNA levels. They suggest that a tide of cancer, could we really have more, and autoimmune disease will follow. People are questioning why the big companies are being allowed to skip the vital animal tests by their shareholders. By the government. If you research ferrets, rats, mice, you'll find that their death rate is dramatically up this year due to COVID testing programs. And their little ratty cells are exploding like overripe grapes all over the lab. Okay, so that might not be a 100% accurate depiction of what's actually occurred. But you know what they say. No smoke without dead ferrets or something of that sort. Sorry, people, but they have a different guinea pig in mind this time. The financial model being used by most major companies these days is called smash and grab. It features the biggest payout for the leaders who slip away into the night, whilst the second biggest payout goes to the lawyers, who then try to lie their way out for a massive profit too. It's a standard business model. I feel sure it's being openly taught at Harvard today. But there will come a time of reckoning. If I have learned anything from Chinese medicine, it's that the body always tries to return to balance. One day soon, when a tsunami of illness overwhelms every health system, the people will find the truth out about the virus. And there will be lynchings. Remember the teenager who didn't want his granny to die? He'll probably be in charge of the army by then. He'll be the one with the biggest weapons and the evidence on his desk that your pharmaceutical company killed his granny for profit. Then let's see what happens. Do I think this was an orchestrated evil? No. No, this is just the seeds that have been sown by capitalism. Please don't think that I don't include China under the heading capitalism either. Did China start it? I don't really care. Will they be happy to have stopped the noise in Hong Kong? Will they be happy they've lost a huge chunk of the people who were drawing on the Communist Party's pension pot? It's a great way to roll out uber control of the people. They're a nation who like to clear out the old in place of new. I don't know. Only time will tell. Some might suggest that as a nation who don't really care about people in general, that the emotional knee-jerk spending that the Western nation resorted to, bankrupting themselves further in the process, might have suited China rather well. Just as a side note, did you know that China owns between $7 trillion of the USA's debt and anywhere up to the full $14 trillion? The US national debt stands at $14 trillion. It all depends on who does the estimates. China either owns half or all of the USA. I also just want to check to see if you think your government looks after you. Sadly, government's first issue is to look after itself. Like any organism, self-interest comes first. Do you ever see politicians trying to put themselves out of a job? Why would you? However, any threat of curtailing of finances or power is met with a storm of opposition. No, I'm sorry, but you don't feature in their calculations. The only question is, how far can I go with my own self-interests before they come with the pitchforks? Let's just define an honest politician. He works 60 hours a week. He's a family man with no mistresses. He owns no shares. He will not take a job in industry after he finishes. He doesn't accept meals, money, cars, or holidays to help lobby groups further their aims. Anybody from any country, anywhere in the whole world, could you get above 5% of your politicians who fit this bracket? Really? Okay, maybe we'll exclude you, New Zealand. Everything seems better there. Has politics really become that filthy? Should we just fire the lot and start back at one man, one vote? Finally, we get to the Taoist version of me. This part is well illustrated by the famous story. When asked about the influence of the French Revolution, the late Premier of China, Zhou Enlai, is reputed to have said, "Too early to stay." Simply, if you're not thinking in 200, 300 or 500 year cycles, you're not seeing the proper big picture. As I've said many times, my life is a speck in time. My death will be as a raindrop returning to the ocean. In 100 years' time, none of this hoo-ha will mean anything to anybody. I'll be a footnote in history. It might be feeling very real to you today, but I think it's time that you learn to go beyond. The real journey is inside you. The rest is just a crazy sideshow. That's the reason I coined the phrase about 10 years ago. It's time to become an intronaut. It's time to cross the last real frontier and start exploring one's own consciousness.